Alright, we are recording again, and if my heart rate goes a little weird, I just had to drink water before starting. Oh, damn it, I keep doing that. I keep getting to the music going. I am not at all looking forward to dealing with the gunshots. It's just I hate starting the fires. It's like, oh, I got so much more to clean up now. Oh, there is another pit. I think this is right here. I mean, obviously, that's why it was. That's soil, and there we go. The hell? That's not cool. Oh, I just realized I've got this. No, may I just say that this organism makes no sense? I mean, if it can be filled in with dirt like this, then how... I mean, true, this one's in a cave, but it's like... high winds, dust storms would kill it easily, right? I mean, maybe not easily, but I mean, you get what I mean. It is a very significant natural weakness to have. So I have an itch on the back of my arm. I'm just gonna go with that scene. I just wanted this here so that in case it created gore or spat out any gore, I could put it in here directly. I know there's that, but I'm gonna work my way down. That I think has one. body. Oh, I was wrong. Did not have any more. There's more back there, but it's like I wanted to get these so I wasn't constantly going by them. The rail there remind me of something that I am curious about, but I have no idea how to even properly read. But you know how with cars that they have like test tracks to make sure they're safe on by actually crashing them with crash test guns in. That's gotta exist for trains too, right? It's like there has to be a place that you can intentionally derail trains to determine how safe they are. And I don't mean you just, because I know that they do for some of the like chemical cargo containers. They will just have test tracks where they just sit there and burn them to see what happens. I don't mean that. I mean an actual, like, however many miles of track you need to get this thing up to speed and then have it hit whatever. And whether it's another train, whether it's a vehicle, whatever. That's gotta exist, right? Or the whole finding out. It's like I once heard that it's if you can get a pop can to stay on a track, that's enough to actually cause a train derail. It's like, how do we know that? Is that just physics? Does somebody just do the math on that, or is that actually and here's the day we did that, and this is where we did that? I mean, it has to exist, right? You can't just have these things that are responsible for millions, possibly to billions of dollars of the economy, and thousands, tens of thousands of passengers, and that's even just limiting it to heavy rail, not the light rail stuff. Like Amtrak. I could believe that's only thousands, tens of thousands in a year. I could look that up, but it's Amtrak. For multiple reasons, it's not that great. But you include the light rail stuff that you just have in cities, like the subways. It's like, you include that, then it's certainly in the millions. Well, no, probably more like tens of millions, actually. Maybe hundreds of millions, so it's a little hard to say. I mean, that's just, like, New York City, I could believe on its own has in the millions of people that take the subway to and from work. So if you look at it as total usage, that could be just for New York City in the hundreds of millions, because you have, millions, tens of millions of people traveling daily, or at least every weekend. It's like, that would add up. Yeah, I do just wonder. It's like, it's gotta be a place, right? Think it'd be a fun place to work? If I knew such a place and had the ability to be like, hey, could I, like, intern there for a month or something? It's like, this is just really neat. I would. I don't have that ability to do that, though, because it's probably, like, the middle of nowhere, and I'm not by the middle of nowhere. And by middle of nowhere, I mean, because for what you're trying to do, it is dangerous. You would need it separated from populated areas, just in case. And I can believe that it's, just like some area in Kansas and Oklahoma that there's so many square miles that are dedicated just for doing that. But I do also want to say, it's like, it is interesting to see people when trying to convince others that, we gotta do things to protect the planet, to reduce the carbon footprint, all that stuff. That, what do they go to a lot of times? It's like, go biking. It's like, why don't you take the bus? Or take the light rail, take the subway, or take, depending where you're going, instead of taking an airplane, take Amtrak. Specifically Amtrak, there are reasons, good reasons, in fact, why you can't do that, but it is interesting that it does seem like rail has been depreciated in people's minds. And for no good reason. I mean, it's like, it works fine. The subway system in Cleveland, it's quite good. I've never had any issues with it. But talking about the Amtrak stuff, it's like, yes, Cleveland does have an Amtrak stop. And it's, like, only at midnight. So it's like, when 2 years ago now, I had to go to Boston for something. A job interview. They flew me out there, and it's like, Boston and Cleveland, it's like, yeah, I mean, something like, Amtrak. For that purpose, it must have a connection there, right? I have no idea for sure, because it's like, it was arranged by the company how I got there, and it's like, they flew me. Okay, great. But I could definitely believe that, there is, to get to Boston from Cleveland, and it's not like these two cities are really that far apart, that just that would have taken more than a day. Just as far as the whole, it's only in Cleveland at, like, midnight to 3 a.m. It's sometimes that, and then it has to go these routes. I mean, Amtrak, it's one of those examples of government waste. Not for the idea, but that the priorities are screwed. Like the whole Cleveland, which is a major metropolitan city in the United States. I know people like to insult it, but Cleveland is on the level, historically, as New York, Chicago, LA, Detroit, Milwaukee. These are all actually a family, well, not so much LA, but Milwaukee, Detroit, New York, Chicago, Cleveland. They're all in the same family of cities that built and grew up and became so powerful, so dominant of cities because they're on waterways. And it's like New York got the advantage of, at one point it was the nation's capital. That is true. And it's better for international stuff, so it's like you have a lot of international business there. So that's really propped up. Chicago, I honestly, I'd just say gang, the mafia kind of stuff, where it's like, it's so corrupt that it kept going. It's like the money's only there because it's in criminal activity that want to keep it successful because it keeps them successful. At least historically. Detroit did fall apart. And it doesn't have this, I don't doubt it has corruption. But it might be different in Chicago, and I know Cleveland has corruption. Oh man. It's like, this was, 11, 12 years ago, when in Cleveland we have our own chapter of our own Federal Reserve, our own branch of the Federal Reserve is here. We also have our own FBI field office. Okay? As in, there are FBI agents that, live in the Cleveland area because they work in Cleveland. Okay? I said 11, 12 years ago, when there was a corruption probe, and it's like, okay, we now need to go in and arrest people. They did not use the Cleveland FBI field office. It was the FBI doing the investigation, but they didn't use that field office because they couldn't trust that it wouldn't be spoiled, that there wouldn't be leaks. They actually had to use, I think, Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh would also be another one of those cities. It's not in that family. Not quite the same, though, because it's purely on a river, whereas all the others I mentioned are either on a lake or an ocean. New York is on an ocean, but Milwaukee, Detroit, Cleveland, and Chicago all connect to the Great Lakes, or actually on Great. Buffalo isn't? Yeah, Buffalo is on one as well. I'm trying to remember if that's technically one of the mega cities or not. It might not be, but it would still have a history tied to it, if I am correct, and it is in fact on the lake. Cleveland certainly has some advantages, so does Chicago. As far as, with Cleveland, you got the Cuyahoga River, so if you want to go into Ohio on a ship, you can't do that at Cleveland. And I had to check, I'm pretty sure that Cleveland, that Cuyahoga does eventually connect down to the Ohio River, which Pittsburgh, I don't know what it might not be on the Ohio River, but it might be on a river that does connect to it, which ultimately feeds into the Mississippi. So it's a very big deal being connected to the Ohio. But Chicago, and I don't remember the name of the river there, it also connects down from Lake Michigan into the Mississippi eventually. But going back to it, I think I got off on that tangent by just talking about how Cleveland isn't a significant city. It is an important city. It's just people like make fun of it, but it's like despite that, Amtrak has like very little presence here. Whereas like Montana has like 3 or 4 different stops. I mean, it's Montana. Cleveland has a larger population than Montana, and yet it gets more Amtrak attention. Why? Because a committee member in Congress who was behind funding for Amtrak at one point was from Montana and wanted that. That's what I mean by when I was saying government waste with Amtrak, is that it's not laid out like a business, because you would make sure that Cleveland has plenty of service. You'd want service in Montana as well, but that might be more of the whole, one stop at midnight to 3 a.m. No offense to anyone in Montana, but it's not a very populous state. And also that stuff with the stops there might not be true anymore, but I'm pretty sure it was true with Montana having so many stops, and legitimately more stops than in theory, privatization would help, because then you could have it be based on what makes sense, what's profitable, but you'd run into the issue of like I was saying, it's a lot of people just don't think of rail. And I definitely felt that way when driving to Wisconsin a couple weeks ago. Just seeing the number of semis hauling whatever, I mean, like Amazon trucks and stuff. UPS, FedEx, and it's like, looking at that, it's like, yeah, I get that there's the additional flexibility of using a truck over using rail. It's like, a truck can go anywhere there's roads. A train can only go on rail and at train yards to like deposit things. But it's like, with how many there were, it's like, you'd think that there would be somebody going, if we did this on rail, it would be much more efficient. I need to get another water. Because I'm thinking about it, with rail, you can have, a mile long. I mean, just thinking of it in terms of trucks. You can have a mile-long double-decker truck, essentially. You can't do that with an actual truck. You can't build up that tall. And we do have a train hub here in Cleveland, so it is always interesting to see how long some of them are, and that, yeah, they're stacked too high with the cargo containers that are what the semis are called. It's like, that's, tremendously advantageous, and it's that's a lot that you're hauling with actually very little energy. That is one thing that some people don't realize, is how energy efficient trains are. Like the diesel electric trains that, is it Northrop Grumman? Is that one of them? I'm sorry that if I'm not misremembering the name of one of the cargo train company. But it's just, they have those things very optimal. And it makes sense, because once you get it up to speed, yeah, you need to maintain the speed, but that's it. Because you have so much inertia, so much momentum, that, yeah, it'll carry itself for quite a distance. But it's also, the diesel electric design itself is very efficient. And it's one of those things that it seems weird that you don't see it being deployed often, at least. There might be some examples, but not very often in electric cars. So to explain what I mean by that, in a diesel electric train, the diesel motor, all it's doing is like charging up a battery or capacitor bank, whatever the energy storage is. That's all it's doing. It's basically converting the chemical energy of the diesel fuel into electrical energy that is then stored. It doesn't directly power the motors. Maybe it can. And it certainly doesn't directly I'm almost certain it doesn't directly power the wheels. The speed of the diesel, of the locomotive, is not tied to the diesel. It uses electric motors for that. Now, an advantage to this is you can then have the diesel engine going at whatever its optimal speed is for efficiency. Like, why do you think cars have transmission? It's to optimize the RPM of the engine for whatever the situation is. Now, yeah, it's also so that you can go faster, but it's like the efficiency of the vehicle, the fuel efficiency, it is more so tied to RPM than your actual speed. I mean, yes, because we use cars to go somewhere, so the speed does matter. You do care about how far you can go. But, whatever gear you're in, if the engine is most efficient running at, say, 2,000 RPM, having it run at 2,000 RPM is what you want to do, and you can't do that with like a diesel electric locomotive. It just runs at that speed constantly. It doesn't need to change, so it's optimal efficiency. Because it's an electric motor, or motors, probably. They're actually driving the wheel. Yeah, I can get a little. And it just seems odd that that method isn't used, to my knowledge, with any hybrid cars. Instead, those operate more on a principle of switching off at times, because a gasoline engine is better for speed than an electric motor. But an electric motor at lower speed can produce a lot of power. Like, I remember seeing years ago now a review talking about somebody using a Tesla for the first time, and one of the things that he did was tried hauling a boat with it. And he talked about how it was awesome. I mean, it's this thing, because Tesla's also heavy because the batteries are heavy, but it was able to put so much power down at low speeds. Hauling it was as easy as if you were doing it with a very powerful truck. But it also had like 30 miles for range or something like that. It was, you immediately drained the battery. Which is the advantage with something like with a diesel electric, in that you're not relying solely on the battery that has its limitation. Well, it has a certain energy density. You're using diesel fuel or gasoline, which has a very high energy density. I mean, it's now an XKCD comic that was showing that I am just annoyed with myself that I keep doing it. And I don't know why. I really have no explanation for why I'm just being stupid to do it. But anyway, it was basically showing what, I think it was, the infographic worked as by showing the amounts of different fuels to achieve the same energy. So it was essentially showing energy density, and how gasoline, what was quite, took very little to produce that amount of energy compared to other things. I think even coal. I think it beat coal. I'm not sure what natural gas would have been. Natural gas might have beat gasoline. But then nuclear, like uranium, is just a tiny speck there because of how tremendously high the energy density is of nuclear fuel. And yet there are environmentalists that want to get rid of that. It's like, it is funny when you really stop thinking about it. It's like, we have had, for decades, energy-producing technologies that satisfy the whole very low to no carbon footprint. And yet, you haven't people who say they care about the environment being like, no, we can't use that. Why? It's like, it gives us what we want. I mean, there was at one point the belief with nuclear power that it would be so plentiful you would only pay the line charge. That's it. That electricity itself would be free. You would just need to pay. You built it. You just needed to pay the access charge. Compare that to today with your electric bill and how much that actually is. Now, true, that may have been wishful thinking, but it still is. That seemed reasonable at the time, that there was that much potential to power country. Now, as far as anyone being like, oh, but there's the whole the waste. It's like, believe it or not, we do have means of dealing with that too. Like, there has been for decades an effort to fund a nuclear recycling center that would be able to take the spent nuclear fuel rods, reprocess them so they could be used again and put back into nuclear reactors. That has been a thing for a while, but two things have been stopping. One, environmental liabilities, and the other is, and I also blame the environment for this, the NIMBY, the not in my backyard stuff, where people don't understand, and I blame the environmentalists for that stuff, and other groups as well, that don't want you to actually understand how safe it is. They want you to think it's bad, because there's an incentive for them. Like, it might be that they invest in solar power or wind power. But another one is that you can also do is hydroelectric. They produce scary amounts of power, realistically. I mean, it's like hydroelectric dams are so powerful. And many of them are able to dwarf nuclear power plants. I mean, it's tremendous. And it's also, the whole, we wouldn't be in the West like we are if not for the Hoover Dam. Okay, I mean, it's the fresh water that's like mead, right? Sure it is. That provides is that significant. And they're getting electricity out of it. I mean, it's amazing. And there are people like, no, we can't ever use this technology. Why not? I mean, it's amazing. And for anyone wondering about the whole, would I accept having a nuclear recycling center in my backyard? Like my specific backyard? No, that would be a bit too close. But it's like, I mean, you and also this is not really sure if there'd be enough room to do that in the immediate area, but I mean, sure, bring it here. Bring it to Northeast, so I'd be happy with that. Hell, I'd even try to work there if I could. I don't know what job I could do there, but I mean, why not? The technology is very safe. It really is. It's kind of like, I liken it to air travel in that it is actually very efficient and very safe. But when there is an accident, it grabs the headlines because it has such a potential to be catastrophic. But even then, it still is. There are designs that's like you can't repeat Chernobyl. There are designs where it's like that is, the laws of physics will prevent that from happening. And there are also newer designs that are meant to be smaller, so it's like that to further remove the possibility. But I think also some are thorium-based, which I don't understand the full, or rather, I don't remember the full processes. At one point, I probably understood. But it's the way thorium breaks down, the way it decays, it doesn't leave any radioactive isotopes. Uranium does. So a thorium reactor would be very clean in that regard. It would produce less power, but that added safety would bring a lot of comfort. The reason you don't see it in America, though, is because of the Cold War, that those radioactive isotopes that uranium fission produces, they can also be used in weapons, and we needed that. Thorium is useful that way, but it's also one of those you would need to continue at least some nuclear power plants because of medical isotopes. Like, it's been some years now, and fortunately the woman was fired, but in Canada, they have a nuclear power plant that is actually responsible for the majority of nuclear isotopes. Well, medical isotopes, I mean. How can I look later? Okay. And she, in her stupidity and ignorance, despite being in charge of the program, in charge of nuclear power production in Canada, shut it down. This was after Fukushima, which is kind of a funny thing because it's like, what happened there was a tsunami. The thing survived the earthquake fine. It was the tsunami. So it's like, it's one of those, it wasn't so much a nuclear accident as it was an accident that included a nuclear reactor that failed catastrophically then. Trying to think of what would be a fair analogy. A car crashing into nitroglycerin is not in like a warehouse that's storing nitroglycerin and going off. That's not the warehouse exploding because of a problem there. It's because a car ran into it. You do need to be able to separate those. And that's kind of how Fukushima was, because it survived the earthquake fine. That's what it was designed to. It was not designed for, a tsunami. That was the problem. And now they are designed that way. But anyway, with Canada, doesn't really have much in the way of fault lines, and that was an inland nuclear power plant, so tsunamis would not be an issue either. Still got shut down and immediately sent the medical world into a panic to try to find and secure medical isotope. I think it was only shut down for a few days before she was fired, and somebody else stepped in and was like, nope, we're back to, we're functional. It's kind of one of those, you will never actually see oil not produced. Like, there will always be oil companies because you need the hydrocarbons of it for production of too many things. Like medicines, actually. There are many medicines that are made from petroleum products. And part of the reason for that, in case you're wondering, is it's easier. A lot of medicines are themselves hydrocarbons, and it is easier to start with a complex hydrocarbon than to make a complex hydrocarbon. Okay, that's spent now. Perfumes also, although that may have changed over. Yeah, so you will continue to see oil drilling, also natural gas drilling, just because it is needed for various things. Besides electricity, or in the case of natural gas heating. You don't see oil heating so much anymore. It used to be very much a thing, but not so much. And oh man, it's also, I remember the whole, there's now a ban on water heaters that are natural gas fired. So they have to be electric. It's like, yeah, have fun with your cold showers when the power goes out. That's another thing that does annoy me with some of this stuff, is the mandates, the regulations that are basically, we're just going to assume that electricity will never fail. And then it does, and it's like, well, you can't do anything about it. You're just screwed. Unless you have a generator of some kind. Oh, that has to run on gasoline or natural gas. I mean, it also doesn't make sense to me, the idea of, especially here in Cleveland, because we do get some power from nuclear here, I think, but most of it would be natural gas. So it's like, we could have the natural gas burned at a power plant to produce the electricity to heat water in your home, or we could have the natural gas that, when it's being burned at the power plant, is being used to heat water to then turn turbines. We could just use, the natural gas to heat the water in our home directly. That would involve less waste because, the electricity flowing, there's resistance. So you get less energy at your home than is actually produced at the plant. Whereas natural gas, it's a chemical battery. It's stable. It's the same amount of energy wherever you burn it. So I really don't understand why. I mean, maybe there are some ways that a power plant is more efficient, but is it that significant, or was it, the regulation banning the gas-fired water heaters? Was it more of a just, it sounds good. It's see, we care. And it's like, yeah, you care, but you're an idiot. I mean, I can definitely go with, you're an idiot on that. Because, I mean, like I said, the power goes out, what do you do? Because it's like, I mean, ours in the house, it is gas-fired, but it is it does have an electric starter. But there's also a thing that we can go down and, hit it, and it strikes to light the pilot, so it'll work. And same thing with, like an electric stove, an oven. I mean, how can you possibly, if you don't have power, how do you cook food? Like, imagine having no power and there's a boiler. How are you going to boil your water? You can't. You would need to, I did see the notes on this. This will try to pull you into pits and kill you. So what you can do is destroy it. Or you can actually just stick it in the blue bin. I think I'll do that. Come on, come on. Oh, it does. Oh, wait. No, I was just stuck on the pit. But yeah, there's a lot of silliness with what? There we go. With that stuff, all that stuff. Right? Oh. Nope. Nope. Seems to have calmed down. And yes, I do know I need to do that. Which is why I'm leaving that light. Yeah, that's man, I actually have this nearly done, don't I? Yes, I do. Now, one thing that would be good, just talking about power, is the power grid in America is not in great shape because it is born of... it's patchwork. It's completely patchwork. So it's just a whole bunch of different systems that were built locally that are connected together. And it's getting kind of old because you don't have the luxury of being able to just be like, oh, we need to change it, so let's shut it down and fix things. It's like, no, you can't interrupt service. So any kind of upgrade would be very, very difficult, be a tremendous challenge. Logistic. But it is also necessary. No, there's another thing that I need to get out of the scene. Not that. Where is it? Although, hang on, I should stop. Especially since this is part 4. Give me part 5, so things work out nicely. Okay. Yeah, that's all I got. I'll see you next time.